Welcome to the Mindful Healers podcast with
Dr. Jessie Mahoney
and Dr. Ni-Cheng Liang.
We are here to help you learn to pause and be present, awaken your breath, and harness the ripple effects of mindfulness for radiant health.
We get you. We know you. We are you.
We have both been successful on the surface, yet struggling underneath. We have both had cluttered brains, been overwhelmed, and exhausted.
We're healers who have found solutions and want to share them with you.
Join us here to discover a better way.
Welcome to our episode continuing within our Mindful Love series on savoring all the moments of parenthood. A reminder that our podcast is not medical advice.
The intention of today's episode is to savor all the moments of parenthood, as it's titled. And that when we stop rushing to get places as a parent, the parent journey is more joyful and more rewarding. Parenting is temporary and wonderful and not wonderful, all at the same time.
You'll discover that every moment can be savored, recognizing that parenting moments are not always bad and not always good, but all of it is temporary.
And the takeaways that being present in the moment at whatever age and stage your children are at is where the magic is. No time or phase of parenting is meant to be gotten through, and every phase is good and bad.
So Jessie, what was the inspiration for today's episode?
It was twofold. One, at our celebration 1-year anniversary party for the podcast, we asked people in attendance what they wanted to hear about. And one of the people who came brought up this idea of enjoying the moments of parenthood, and that we so often think about where we want to be in parenting, where we want to go, and then also what we missed and what we don't have anymore. And that this person was the parent of an only child, and didn't she miss this age or that age? And so the offering was that we could help one another and enjoy the journey and connect with our children more if we just enjoyed where they were, rather than looking to where we wanted them to get to or what we might be missing about their past. And then the other inspiration is that, as many of you know, I teach a Parent with Presence course, and I just finished it. And this notion, the progress that people make, and I don't know if progress is the right word, but the insight that they have about being in the moment with their children, when they let go of this judgment of what's to come and where they've been and whether they're in the right spot and how much progress their children are making, and just enjoy their children as they are in that moment, that their shift to enjoying parenthood and enjoying the journey and being able to connect so much more. I'm inspired to share how people do that and what they think along the way and what allows them to get there. So the magic of applying mindfulness to parenthood is that when we're not mindful, we miss it, honestly. We're busy doing and cleaning and getting all the things done and planning and arranging for our children's future. And we miss all of the sweet, delicious, lovely little interactions. And we bring energy that changes the relationship. And so mindfulness helps us get through the difficult times, and it also magnifies the joys. And without it, we miss the beauty that's right in front of us. And there's a quote that refers to the fact that we are often in such a rush that there's no time for the joy. And this resonates with me. I have 2 kids who are pretty much gone out of the house. My middle one's a senior in college. And I think back to how much time I spent doing things, driving, showing up here, planning things, and not just being in the moment of, and it might have been a moment of nothingness, really, just hanging out or washing dishes, but being really present with them. And though I have tons of delightful memories, I wish that I had had a lot of these mindfulness skills in that moment. And even if it's a very simple thing. I remember thinking, I think it's my youngest child had a lot of trouble tying his shoes. One of them did. I don't actually remember who it was. And I really just wanted him to learn how to tie his shoes because it would be much faster getting out the door if he could tie his shoes. It was the youngest. And so I kept buying him those Vans without shoelaces because that was going to be more efficient. And yet there is this delight to sort of sitting down and helping your child learn to tie their shoes and work through that. And I think I was in such a rush to get through to the part where I didn't have to deal with that I missed sort of the joy in that connection. And so remembering that everyone's on their journey exactly where they're supposed to be, and that our being in a rush, we often miss the beauty.
That so resonates. We engage in mental time travel so much with our kids. And that phrase, mental time travel, I'm reading the book Peak Mind by Dr. Amishi Jha, and she talks a lot about mental time travel and how mental time travel prevents us from being here, present now, with ourselves, our lived experience, and especially with our kids. So we do a lot of future living with our kids, wanting to get to one developmental milestone to the next one, the next grade level, the next test, the next whatever upcoming event is happening. And while all of that is still really important, we miss living with them, as in the here and now, because of future living. So living with them as in experiencing together what life is, our direct lived experience together. So we can be connected to our kids in this way, rather than living these parallel lives as roommates, for instance, that we as parents just happen to like really check in with them and want them to do their homework or tie their shoes. That's just a natural human tendency.
One that I think we often disguise as like appreciation or guilt or gratitude too for the moments that we had and how delightful they were. And yet we're still living in that past. Sometimes too, you were talking about the developmental milestones, and so much of the time as parents, I think we're focused on the outcome and the goal of having a successful child who we often hear who launches well or who's going to be a good citizen. And I am even guilty, I'll say, of talking about our goal in raising children is to raise happy, healthy, responsible adults. That is looking ahead. The purpose of that phrase is to really think about the fact that it's a long game and there's no hurry, and that each phase leads to something. It's just building upon itself, getting to the adult phase. But even the relationship that we have with our children as adults is very, very, very long. And so the intention of that is to notice how long it is and how much time we have. But it also keeps us out of the moment, even that thought that we're still looking ahead to a goal or an outcome or getting them to college. And I see with a lot of physician parents too, the catastrophizing of what if it doesn't work out well? What if they're not successful? What if I make a mistake? What if something goes wrong? And so it's not just allowing the natural developmental process, but wanting to influence the outcomes that keeps us out of the here and now. I love this idea of mental time travel, thinking how much of our lives we spend, not just in parenting, but of our lives in mental time travel.
Yeah, and mindfulness helps to combat that.
Yeah. And then this idea that childhood is temporary, right? It is a developmental phase. And so we actually want to appreciate every little moment of that developmental phase. And yet we see it, I think, as like we get to the end of childhood and then we have an empty nest and then we get to the next phase. And so if each step along the way is equally important, that might be a way to ground us into being in the moment and enjoying the moment. And that's really the whole point of parenthood, and the whole point of our relationships is to be in that moment and experience the connection. It's not about what happens tomorrow. And another thought is that we sometimes talk about when it's messy. So when we have toddlers, when we have teenagers, those are sort of phases that maybe we want to get out of, the terrible twos, or, you know, when they're in their 20s will like them again, is something that's very commonly said. And perhaps this isn't the best approach. Let me just throw that out there. And that, we have this semblance of maybe the newborn period is hard, and yet babies are so lovely. And there's all this conflicting stuff out there that takes you out of the moment of just noticing what is. Bringing me back to the idea of mindful eating, like just mindful parenting is literally smelling the baby hair and appreciating the awkwardness of the tweens and appreciating the, funny, outlandish comments of the teen and the endless possibilities of the college student who thinks all is possible. It's just, they're all of the moments, and they can be messy and they can be hard. It's not that parenting is easy, right? There's lots of chaos and lots of hard and lots of disappointment and lots of temper tantrums and teenage rebellions and ADHD, etc. But wishing to be somewhere else than other than where we are is a bit of resisting reality, and honestly also missing the moment.
The terrible twos, and how interesting that when you mentioned all the different age groups, there were different connotations associated with each one. Like there was, for me, some like negativity associated with like the teenage years, and then even the label terrible twos. I just want to put this out there that terrible twos is totally a misnomer. It's more like terrible 18 months until like 4 years of age for some, like my almost 4-year-old. So just even our associations with different age groups and our preconceived notions about what that's going to be like isn't necessarily fair to the experience of mindful parenting.
Yeah. Well, and I think going back to these major tenets of mindfulness is the way to help yourself savor it and be in the moment. And trust is a key one. And I see many of us, myself included, we often don't trust ourselves as parents because we love, and we worry because we love, and therefore we don't trust. And so then we're not in the moment. But if we can trust that we as a parent are exactly where we need to be and exactly the parent they need at this moment, and they as our child are exactly where they need to be in their developmental progress at that moment, because that is where we are and who we are and the relationship we have, that allows us to step out of the fixing and the worrying and step into the being with them. And when we are being with them, it's much more fun. Even if they're having a temper tantrum, you're experiencing it fully. And one of the things that I find really helpful is for people to be able to trust that they will get their children help if they need it. And when they can tap into the fact that I can trust myself, I'm reliable, I will, I can sit here and be with them. And if things seem like they're not getting better, I can trust that I will be able to get the help, and I will ask the questions, and I will be there for them. That tends to help people settle back into the moment and enjoy where their child is at that moment.
I have a perfect example of this power of trust that you're mentioning. I think if we can trust ourselves as parents, knowing that we're doing the best we can, and then also trusting our kids and that they're doing the best they can with the circumstances at hand. So for instance, just this past weekend, and part of this story, Jesse, where I was really torn about whether or not I should attend an away volleyball tournament that my eldest was going to compete in, with the Omicron surge and everything, but also knowing the last tournament and a part of the tournament where she struggled through with a lot of self-criticism and self-doubt, me wanting to be there for her, but also kind of navigating the risk of COVID. And so ultimately what I ended up deciding in trusting just that very same thing, and that I was doing the best that I could, was to show up with N95 masks on for my eldest, so that I could be there as a source of moral support for her, regardless of whether or not she needed it. And then making the conscious decision to leave my unvaccinated, almost 4-year-old at home with my dad. So kind of coming up with a creative parenting solution to address the situation at hand and trusting myself in that I was making the right decision for our family for that circumstance.
And having your own back, that
Yes.
you were going to do this and it was going to work out how it was going to work out. And everybody in the long term would be okay.
And it turned out to be okay.
Yeah. Yeah. The other thing that I think is really powerful is trusting our children. And they often tell us exactly what they need, and we don't listen because we think we know better. And so, one of the other mindfulness tenets, curiosity, I think is really helpful. And I can't think of the right one, but listening. Maybe you can help me think of but we often don't listen. We're very programmed to what we think is right. And our children will often say that they need a break or they really want you to come. And maybe you can't always come, or they need to do more or they need to do less, and we often discount that. And so allowing your children to say, I don't want to do that activity anymore, and asking them why and exploring why and trusting, knowing that more is not better always. And that if we allow them to learn to listen to themselves as adults, they will also learn to listen to themselves. And many of us did not do that. We're not taught that way. And so we don't listen, and we had to relearn how to listen through mindfulness. And so part of being a mindful parent is listening to your kids and letting them practice their own mindfulness and not deprogramming it along the way.
Trusting that they're capable enough to communicate their own needs. So, for instance, my eldest daughter did end up saying, like, I would like for you to be there, which I thought was just kind of made all the difference for me in terms of helping me to decide one way or the other. Because growing up, I don't think I ever asked my parents that. I always thought that they were too busy, or that there wasn't enough time, and that, they didn't need to be there. So I think as we are becoming mindfully aware of our parenting styles, we can also empower our kids to become mindful of their own needs and to express them to us.
And treating ourselves as a team at whatever age they're at. And I know it may not seem like it, but even toddlers are on your team, and their temper tantrums is a way of communicating. We often think of them as stressful and unhelpful and chaos and a mess, but I often liken a toddler temper tantrum as a reset. They're just resetting. And so they are communicating in the way that they know how. And that even listening to that and using that as we talked a bit in an episode about nature, as nature screaming with the pandemic and tsunamis and all of these things. And temper tantrums are children screaming like, hey, need a reset, something's not right. And again, we often don't listen, or we can't listen by the way our society has set things up. But realizing that perhaps we need to create a life with more space so we are able to accommodate and listen. And just acknowledging all of our own humanity. We even as adults have temper tantrums. I always say they just look different. Hopefully. One other mindful tenet that I thought is worth bringing up in this idea of savoring is the non-striving. And so many parents strive on behalf of their kids or want their children to strive. And we were, most high achievers are strivers. But realizing that there is value in non-striving and savoring what is and where you are, and not worrying so much about what's ahead, but being in the moment, whatever it is.
So with talking about tips and tools, harkening back to our last episode on nature, building intentional time in nature is one great way to help foster mindful parenting and mindful youth. Simply getting curious and exploring nature together without really a set agenda. And then also being very intentional about having screen-free time together, whether it be outside or inside. And then I can't underscore the importance of listening, like truly actively listening to your child, regardless of their age, enough. Like really listening, no multitasking, making eye contact, maybe even, especially in the day and age of this pandemic, safe physical connection, whether it be holding hands, hugging, snuggling, a gentle pat on the back, a side hug.
And some other tips that might help are appreciating what everyone's good at, and perhaps their growth areas is how I like to put it. So their superpowers and their growth areas. And especially perhaps in a family like yours, and also in a family like mine, where we have kids of very different ages and adults who are very different personality styles, realizing what each person within that family unit, what's their superpower right now, right? And what's their growth area right now, can tap you into the temporariness. So there's not the label of, maybe being not focused enough, or the label of being the troublemaker child, or the label of X, but maybe they're working on impulse control right now, but their superpower is, focus in building Legos, for example. And I think that it really helps us to see what we bring and what each of our children bring. That's a value. That's the superpower. And it's sort of fun because kids like superpowers, and they often will tell you what your superpower is and what their superpower is, depending on the age. And then what's the area that they're working on? They can almost always tell you themselves. Yeah, I really need to work on this. My teenager said to me today, yeah, I'm not fully formed yet, Mom. I shouldn't have done that. And I was like, yeah, exactly. But I think when you think about it as not fully formed yet, or that amygdala not completely developed, it takes it out of like, oh my God, we're in the terrible teens. And when is this going to end? And when is he going to not make dumb decisions or say rude things, right? All of a sudden, it's just like, oh, he's just not fully formed yet. So I think that it gets you out of the judgment piece of it. And interestingly, because kids are actually much better at this than adults, he then told me all the things he was really good at right now. He's actually right. I'm just reflecting on this. I was like, oh, he is really good at those things. And yes, he has some growth areas in these other areas, which I, as the mom, was complaining about. Which it isn't that you shouldn't mention it, or you shouldn't, have expectations and have rules or safety guidelines, but that understanding it is all a developmental growth trajectory. And so that if we can be in the moment and realize that it's a process and a long journey, that can be much more powerful. So I really like the exercise of looking at everyone in the family unit. And especially for those of you who have challenges with co-parenting, this can be really helpful, because seeing what you bring to the parenting situation and what your spouse or partner or co-parent, even if you're separated or in different houses, brings, the good and the growth areas, can help you see also that you don't have to be everything as the parent, and that as a team, perhaps you're both bringing different things. I think we see a lot of parents who are also into comparative suffering, and who does more and who takes more responsibility and all of these things. And so that can be a lovely exercise of appreciating everyone exactly as they are in that moment. And the offering today is really to savor whatever it is, whatever age your children are at, not looking at what's ahead and what the goal or the outcome is, and not looking at when it will be better. And even in moments of difficulty, even in moments of temper tantrum, toilet training, driver's ed, all the things, or perhaps, anything that feels like a struggle or societally has been framed as a struggle, noticing what's happening and allowing the icky feelings, because when we try to resist the reality of the temper tantrum or the fact that it frustrates us, this isn't to say, oh, celebrate the temper tantrum, because they're no fun, then they're stressful, but to just be in it and experience it. And when you have the full spectrum of that, with connection and joy and the glee of a toddler in the moment, enjoying nature or water or the beach or the sand, or even something delicious to eat, that those two things are part of the whole experience, not wishing that that toddler become school age and be able to do something else or be somebody else.
And lastly, in terms of savoring, using the mindfulness-based stress reduction circle of awareness when encountering both moments of difficulty and enjoyable moments, you can give yourself some space to acknowledge what's happening by noticing your emotions, by noticing your body sensations, and also your thoughts. And then in both scenarios and all of the shades in between, whether it be a difficult situation or an enjoyable one, you can then choose your response to your child. So as always, we like to close our podcast with some reflection questions. So what do you already savor in your parent-child relationship?
What might you want to savor more?
And having heard this podcast, how will you apply mindfulness to really living with your children?
Thanks so much for listening today. Please stay on after the sound of the singing bowl for our mindful moment offering. And if you'd like to work on your own mindfulness practice, please join us for the first ever Mindful Healers Retreat coming this summer in July at Green Gulch Farm and Zen Center. We would love to meet you in person and practice mindfulness and fully savoring the moment with you. As always, if you want to declutter your mind, be more present, and start truly living your one wild and precious life, come find us at the mindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Work with one of us.
Work with both of us.
Start or up-level your mindfulness practice.
Discover how mindful coaching can change your life.
Or even better, do both as part of our Mindful Healers programs and retreats. You can find links to find out more about our programs and join our communities at themindfulhealerspodcast.com.
Reach out and get started on your journey to a life better lived today.
The content of this podcast is not meant to be medical or life advice. If you choose to participate in our mindful moments, please do so safely.
Welcome to today's mindful moment, an opportunity to savor this moment, to enjoy the present. Take a moment to find a comfortable seat wherever you find yourself. If you're driving or in an unsafe spot, please opt out. If you're walking, pause. Pause and be still for a moment. And notice how you feel. In order to savor, we have to pause. We have to stop and be present. Savoring comes from being in the moment with ourselves and those we love. Savoring is a way of appreciating. It's a way of noticing. So take in a long, deep inhale, savoring the in-breath through your nose. And savor the long, smooth exhale as well. Letting the breath go. Take a deep, nourishing inhale. And a long exhale, letting it go. Pause for a moment to savor this moment. To notice perhaps fingers tingling in your fingers and your toes. To notice perhaps the breath circulating through you. Realizing that when we move through the world on autopilot, we don't notice and we don't savor. Taking a moment here to enjoy the deliciousness of the pause and the deliciousness of being present. Take in another deep, nourishing inhale through your nose. And a long, smooth exhale through your mouth. And think in your mind's eye for a moment, what is it in your life and in your world in this moment that you wish to savor, that you wish to notice, that you wish to enjoy, perhaps that you wish to appreciate? Taking a moment to allow that in, to enjoy it in this moment, to be present. and offering in this moment a reading from one of my favorite books. It's called Fleetingly Precious. This day has never been here before and will never come again. This is the moment you have been waiting for. Quench your thirst and live like there is no tomorrow. Sing and dance and stick your head out the window. Look around, smile, give, receive, open, allow. Get out of the stories that don't serve you, the ones that are parading around in your head, pretending to be so important and urgent. Feel the breeze on your face. Life is happening all around you and through you. Let it tingle you alive today. All of this, what we call our life, is so fleetingly precious. So I offer the thought to take a moment today to enjoy the moment. Savor the moment. Savor the ages and stages that perhaps your children may be. Savor the stage that you yourself are in. Savor this moment in the world around you. Savor the trees just as they are in this season, not wishing for them to be in another season, but wishing for them to be in this season. Savoring the weather exactly as it is, perhaps cold and windy, perhaps warm and sun-soaked. Savor whatever it is, exactly as it is in this moment, not looking ahead, not looking behind, allowing regret to be optional, letting go of all of the stories and allowing yourself to pause and sink into this moment. Savor the inhale once again, long, deep, and smooth through your nose. Savor the release on the exhale. Notice your fingers tingle. Notice your toes tingle. Savor how you feel in this moment. Savor the stillness. Savor the rest. Savor the peace. Savor the pause. Savor being present for all that is, exactly as it is. If it's safe for you to do so, bring your hands to heart center. Savor the skin-to-skin contact between each fingers. Savor the palms connect with strength. Press the thumbs into your sternum. Savor the connection to your own heart space and your heart wisdom. Take in a deep breath. Exhale. May you all have a beautiful day. Savor it. Be in the moment. It's fleetingly precious. Choose to enjoy. When you're ready, slowly open your eyes if they're closed and let the light back in. Give yourself a moment to savor the chance to readjust, to recalibrate, to accommodate. Savor the transition back into the busyness of your world and of your day. And take a final moment to savor how good even this short moment of mindfulness feels. We'll see you next week.